push continues to demonize and dehumanize people who dare be hesitant towards the new medicine, I am going to continually repeat that I have a valid and legitimate point of view, and that it does not deserve to be mischaracterized, misrepresented, maligned, or gaslit. Number one, in my point of view for why I'm hesitant, is that the manufacturers have no liability. This means that if anything does happen, they aren't responsible. To me, that doesn't establish trust in a consumer to get something when they're already set up and free from liability. Two, most vaccines go through a 10 to 15 year testing period before they're released upon the public. So the very rushed nature of this, a matter of months, despite the constant platitudes that are repeating it's safe and effective, that is just words, that's just lip service. Only time will tell if there are long-term effects, because the people who have gotten it are the test subjects. And so when people are insisting that they know it's safe, I don't know what kind of delusion they need to be in, but there's just no proof of that. They are the test. Number three, the actual brochures for the injection clearly call it an operating system. They don't call it, it's called, the injection itself is called an operating system. That wording is a bit strange, and if you look into that further, you're going to realize, if you know the ingredients, that this isn't just another medicine. And number four, the very fact that there is a marketing campaign that is extremely pushy, manipulative, coercive, and has an element of shaming and belittling people who dare question it. Okay, that's a huge red flag for credibility, for trust, and for transparency. Why? Because many doctors and scientists have been censored, misrepresented, mischaracterized, slandered, gaslit, and censored for dare raising a question or concern. Okay? And when you actually follow the science, that means you are willing to have a transparent discussion to the nuances, because there are no settled, certain scientific principle. Like it's not just all settled. It's a novel virus, if it is a virus, but it is a novel virus, and we deserve to have discussions about it. We don't need to just be treated like chattel and kind of just pushed along and really just whipped into this. There's only one solution, and it's ours. I find that extremely off-putting, and it's probably the main reason I am hesitant. It's because the very nature of the manipulation and pushiness toward it, and the extreme ridicule for daring to raise a question or concern that is completely valid, completely legitimate, completely scientific, right? And so this campaign that demonizes and dehumanizes and mischaracterizes people, whether they're in the scientific community or whether they're a layperson and they just have in their gut, they say, you know what, I'm hesitant, I don't want to get this, or hey, I'm going to wait. You're not even allowed to have an answer like, I'm going to wait. It's like, hurry up and get it. And that's just, there should be an emphasis on building trust and informed consent. Instead, there's an emphasis on pushing you to do something using fear, shame, and kind of that social, you better be with the social group, you know, or you'll be shamed by your tribe, right? Those are not, that's what an abusive person does in a relationship, is that level of pushiness and shame. Somebody that is looking out for your best interests and interested in building trust, and that includes if big pharma and government wanted to build trust and have transparency and have informed consent, their approach would be far more empathetic and compassionate, and have a willingness and open-mindedness to discuss the nuances, right? And so that's one of my big reasons is that level of coercion, that level of pushiness in the marketing campaign. The next reason is that we're going to go into actually science, because we're always told to follow the science. Well, I follow the science. And the test that is used as a tool to determine the cases is called the PCR test. And the inventor of this test, Kary Mullis, he has said about the test that he invented, when it was being used to determine AIDS cases in the 90s, he said, hey, my test is not a diagnostic tool. It doesn't have anything to do with identifying viruses. And he said, my test is a process that amplifies genetic material so that we can get a better look at it. So it can find, as he put, it can find anything and anyone. So it could look at a banana, it could look at Coca-Cola, it could look at a human, it could look at a dog, and it is actually just looking and identifying genetic material. And you can put it up in amplification cycles in order to better see that genetic material made up in a body. But it has nothing to do with identifying a virus. But as it's being used, they're trying to use it as a basis for, this is showing that there's COVID, and they can turn up the amplification cycle to a certain amount, and you can find COVID in anyone or anything. And this is better explained by, I would say, look into Kary Mullis's videos where he's actually talking about how this test was his test that he invented, he would know, his test was being used during the AIDS epidemic and why it was wrong. And he was talking actually about Anthony Fauci, because Anthony Fauci was part of the AIDS epidemic where they were using the same machine, and there was a lot of fraud going on with that. And Kary Mullis died in 2018, so he cannot speak up to say that his test is once again being used in the wrong way and really in a deceitful way to the public, because it is the basis for determining the cases, right? And so when we see all this talk about asymptomatic cases, well, it's because the test is finding anything and anyone. So they're acting as though they're finding COVID in people when they're just amplifying genetic material. So definitely something to actually look into. And if you follow the science, you'll realize, well, that is definitely suspicious. Maybe I should stay curious instead of constantly sanctimonious and lecturing people about following the science and I believe science. It's like, then follow it. The next scientific principle we'll go into, which also ties into the PCR test, is Koch's postulate. Koch's postulate is the specific process that you go for in order to identify a virus. Now, it's a 4-step process, and so far, they have not used Koch's postulate to isolate the virus COVID, right? And when you go through Koch's postulate and you're able to isolate it, then you'll have a name that is not, you'll notice that COVID is referred to as an extension of SARS, right? That's because it has not been isolated by itself by Koch's postulate. So it hasn't satisfied the scientific process for being known as its own virus. So that's suspicious. I would think that we would have done that way before creating a vaccine, because if we don't have a virus to isolate, then what's in the vaccine? So these are valid and legitimate concerns brought up by doctors, by people in the scientific community, and by lay people who have actually followed the science instead of just following the platitude. So these are my concerns for why I'm not getting and why I'm hesitant about it. And will I be vilified for having them? No, because I'm smart and because I actually looked into these things, because I wanted to make a prudent decision. I didn't just want to follow the herd and feel like a good person and worship at the altar of a vaccine. Okay? So please get out of your religion of praising this vaccine and talking about how you're going to pick out an outfit for it and then like putting your card on a bracelet. I see so many strange just weird genuflecting toward this that I truly find unnerving and off-putting. And this kind of cult behavior toward what should be just, if it is what it is, that it's just a neutral medicine you get. You don't have to be acting this, you don't have to be groveling and praising and getting down on your knees and like praising it so much. Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying there's a continual push to malign, misrepresent, and mischaracterize people who have a very valid and legitimate concern. And I will not be told that I am dumb or evil or selfish for actually being smart, prudent, cautious, thoughtful, reflective, and actually pretty selfless in terms of I'm not going to just follow the crowd and do something, go along to get along. So I just want this message to get out as, you know, you may navigate the pressure from the group, the pressure from the media campaigns, and the pressure that's going to keep building. But just know that your opinion is valid and that many people share your opinion. And there's a perception created that there's you alone have this and then that nobody else thinks the same. But actually most of us are very cautious and suspicious of the way that this campaign has not built trust or credibility. So it's on them to work on their level of informed consent and building trust and credibility. And one way they could do that is being liable for the injury. But the manufacturers are not liable, and their campaign is coercive, and it's pushy, and it's actually more like an abusive relationship dynamic of control and shaming than it is any level of empathy, compassion, and a willingness to have a conversation to build the trust and comfort to want to take the medicine. So remember that. You are in you have every right to make up your own mind about your medical decisions. And they can write an Atlantic article about how it's the peak of privilege to not get a V. It's not the peak of privilege. It's the peak of somebody that can see through coercion and propaganda. And just, if you want to share that article and put a flag up for your cowardice and following the crowd as a virtue, well, you are not on the, quote, right side of history that you think you are. You are delusional and in denial and thinking that being reflexively obedient is a virtue. And it is not. Thank you.